Hello, everyone. In a way, if previous speakers talked about some philosophical ideas and worldwide approach, then I will be more down to the ground. And in a way, I will give you an overview of restoration projects from 1990 to 1999. Basically, I'll be covering 1990s, early years of the restoration of Latvian independence. Actually, we had a lot of projects during this period. But first of all, let me say that we didn't actually start from scratch after regaining of our independence, because we simply had to continue what had been done already for years before, because the monument protection system in Latvia has been working in Latvia already from 1923. Which means that also during the Soviet times, thanks to some enthusiasts, those who have worked also during the first years of independence of Latvia, they in a way ensured this continuity throughout the Soviet times. Which means that the restoration as a sector didn't have to be invented once again from scratch. And as we renewed our independent state of Latvia, we also continued the restoration of such large-scale projects of Rundale Palace, which was only finalized in a couple of years ago. Likewise, in early years of independence, we finalized the Polish restoration project, which of course was quite significant to our country. And we should also mention the house of Mentzendorf, which was restored specifically under this Polish project. Of course, also the Restoration Design Institute also continued to be active. Also, the Scientific Restoration Board continued its work, but afterwards it was privatized, and now it is a private company called Restoration. Then in the early 90s, other construction companies also joined those who are engaged in restoration. Because, of course, in a free market situation, the number of such construction companies is growing or going down. It's only natural. Also, the Restoration Institute actually afterwards was partly privatized and divided into many smaller companies until it was dissolved in early 2000s. But fortunately enough, I must say that the archives of the Restoration Institute were overtaken by the National Heritage Board, the hosts of today's event. And based on which initiative this conference was organized. But when we talk about the development of a sector, we must also talk about appropriate education. And it was only after Latvia regained its independence we actually introduced such education opportunities under the auspices of the chemistry faculty of the Riga Technical University, which has contributed a lot to the restoration sector. They have educated a lot of specialists who are still active and work actively on a variety of projects and also continue their educational activities. Also, the Academy of Arts and also the Construction College also offers such study programs. Also, certain educational activities and also administrative activities are carried out by the National Heritage Board, and we also keep documentation in our archives from as early as the First Republic of Latvia. I must say that mainly documentation is tied to specific sites or buildings. However, if we want to have a bird's view information regarding Latvian sites, then basically they are closely linked with the permit issuing documents, because acquiring of permit is the first step whenever you launch a project. But since I was mainly interested in restoration, conservation and research, but what concerns these permits, we have been issuing them since 1990 and still continue to do so. Of course, this whole procedure has been improved throughout these years. So here I have a list of permits issued regarding specific sites. Here in 1990, for example, and these are regarding restoration or conservation. And I will give you a couple of examples from this period of time. But of course, I will not be able to give you more detailed overview about what has been done in all these years. So I will just give you some highlights. Here we see the Liepāja Holy Trinity Lutheran Church. Actually, it was a turning point for this church. We started with the sculptural restoration and conservation activities, and actually the work is still ongoing. And quite similar situation we encountered also in other churches as well, because whenever we had to issue a permit for restoration, we have to, of course, get to know the specific site. And of course, whenever we are issuing permits for churches or for castle ruins, we have to have a slightly different approach, which we have elaborated through the years. Here we can see one of the largest sites, which is the Riga Brethren Cemetery. Here we dealt with the restoration of sculptures, sculpted different objects, which was quite challenging for the restoration specialists. Actually, the restoration work started before 1990. Already in 1999, And these restoration works involved a wide scope of specialists, including chemists, biologists, geologists, those who were qualified to assess the condition of these stone carvings and sculptures. Here we jump to 1993. We also here have a list of restoration and conservation projects across Latvia. But if we look back at 1992, the law was adopted regarding the protection of cultural monuments, which also, in a way, improved the procedure for issuing the permits for restoration. This is why now we have more projects. Here you can see pictures from a massive project in Aglona, Saint Mary Basilica. In a way, we could call it reconstruction in this case, because not only we changed the surroundings, the environment in which this basilica sits, but also we built up some annexes and also the altar and the central icons were restored along other elements within this basilica. And also during the same time, here we have the Burtnieki Lutheran Church from a different part of Latvia. Here we returned some elements from the Rundale Museum to their rightful place, so to say. Here you can see also paintings, and as we worked on them, we found new, or rather older, layers. Here you can see the list of projects from 1994. It is quite a long list. I will definitely not go through each project, but here you can see a larger project for which the permit was issued only in 1994. And here we were restoring the finishing of the building. Namely, the Opera House was closed down already in 1990, and by 1995 we were finished with the restoration. And this should be regarded as the site or restoration project of the century. Of course, also here we encountered several problems. However, we are quite happy with the outcome. Probably in this case, we lacked some initial research work. In a way, this is why we met more challenges than usually. Also, in 1994, here we can see another project, namely the Kraslava castle, which went in parallel with the Riga Castle restoration for the needs of the president. However, this site outside Riga, we already, in a way, recovered or removed some layers in order to discover some wall paintings and murals. So at that time it was very uncertain how this castle would be used after the restoration. In a way, it's a very large building, and this is why not always local municipalities can find appropriate use for such buildings. Here is another example from 1994, Vērgala Lutheran Church, which is located on the seaside. In this particular project, this was basically vandalized after the Second World War. And when we launched the project, we first have to deal with the consequences of the vandalism. Then we returned to this portal and altar. Of course, each project comes with its own specifics, and in each case we have to, in a way, strike a balance between reconstruction, conservation, and restoration. Here we have the long list from the following year, from 1995. Of course, each case is very specific. I could go on for hours. However, I'm giving you just a brief overview. And here, one of the highlights of the year was the Krustpils castle, which, to my mind, is quite impressive. Although it suffered a lot throughout centuries from different wars and disasters and vandalism. And it was also used for the needs of the Soviet army at one point. So it has quite rich history. Now it's under the responsibility of the Krustpils municipality, and they are step by step diligently researching the history of this and values to be found in this castle. And I would say that they are doing a really good job. Here you can see how they, in a way, discovered some underlying murals. Now we jump to the next year, where the permit was issued for the restoration of the Monument of Freedom. However, in fact, it started in 1998 and went on for 3 years. The working on this monument, of course, taught us very valuable lessons. In the bottom picture, you can see some moss growth on the stone structures, which maybe says that not always you have to restore monuments, but if you had maintained them properly throughout years. Here you can see the altar of Sabile Lutheran Church with the painting. And this was the first instance of the restoration of the painting itself. And Liana Zankaln actually created a specialized division which mainly works on the restoration of paintings. So in a way, she has educated a new generation of specialists in this area. Here we have another site located in Old Town Riga, where during the works we recovered such ceiling paintings. However, of course, in the free market situation, we had little say because it wasn't classified as a monument of historic significance, and therefore we had little say in what happens to these paintings. And just one of them was preserved and moved to a different room in the same building. And of course, we wish to restore and also to include this building in the list of protected heritage. And after the restoration, there was a big breakthrough in the restoration of the organs. This is from the Ugala Church organ that was built in the early 18th century. 1701, I think, is when the organ was built. So the builders and users of this organ, this is when they realized that organ is not just providing musical background to the church ceremonies, but it is also a part of the historic building and carries a historic value with it as well. And this organ was, abandoned for many years, and then it was decided to restore it, which is a sort of an understandable desire. And then there was a team of German and Swedish organ masters created, so they came together, they debated on the best possible options for quite a long time, and then they developed a restoration plan and basically reconstructed the organ in its authentic appearance of 1701, and now the organ is being used. It's actually played on. And this is my sort of story. It is Igena Church in Western Latvia. Latvian Restoration Association had a group of active people, and for 9 summers, for 9 years, we'd spent a week workshopping there, if you will, and we repainted or recreated the paint of this church painting, and it was black previously. It was not restoration really, we just scrapped the paint off, and there was only 1 layer of paint, in fact, and there was not much to be done, and we had to also sort of do a little bit of preservation of the surface. And Limbaži, well, this is a case which shows that you can also have major restoration projects in smaller settlements, not only the big cities, and we restored the wall painting in one of the rooms, and then we also discovered another room wall painting. And this is not a townhouse. This is in fact one of the houses owned by a merchant in the ancient times. So it is Nurmaji Church. The altar is still being reconstructed. I mean, the reconstruction project is in progress, and there is only one restoration master working on it. So they are restoring the wooden carvings. So they dismantle the elements and then restore them back. But it is still, not completed. It's in progress. But what is or has been completed is the Riga Cathedral organ and reconstruction of its major elements, the pipes and other fittings. And I think the restoration project still started in 1990, and the idea was to reconstruct it because it was in a bad condition, it was polluted with various microbiological, there was different microbiological pollution, and it was, its integrity was also damaged, and then the technical college students and Alien Boarding began restoring it. And the restoration was completed only in 2017, late 2017. However, to be honest, this project involved not only the restoration of the wood carvings, but also those fittings had to be repainted, and also the structural integrity had to be restored as well. Those of you who don't know this project should probably know that the organ was built over several centuries. It was 1621 when the central elements of the organ were installed, adorned with wooden carvings in the Mannerism style. It was slightly different initially or originally, but then in the 1700s, additional wood carvings were added to make it more lush, and in the late 1700s the organ was expanded to the dimensions of the corridor, and wood carvings in Rococo style were added, and then was painted in gold with different golden decorations, and then it was repainted into white, into gold, and then it was light brown, and several shades of gold and bronze, and we discovered that there were 12 layers of paint on the most ancient wood carvings, in fact. So now the central part, which is sort of the Mannerism, it is in the Mannerism color, so it's brown plus gold. As regards to the Rococo elements or wood carvings in Rococo style, it is blue plus gold. Some of the pipes, and those pipes from the 18th century have the silver greenish shade. Does it seem too colourful to you, or do you think that the gold pulls it all together? What do you think? Nevertheless, that's all I had to say. Thank you for your attention.